Welcome to Detroit. Doesn't matter if you have one ass cheek and 3 toes. I will beat your ass. You can drown them. And that's what we gotta be. That's who we have to be. Because that's our domain. That is our domain. Because we'll tread water as long as it takes to fucking bury you.
Takes the snap, turns, gives to Montgomery, right side, end zone, touchdown, Detroit Lions! Yes.
We are driven by Detroit.
Hello, Detroit Lions friends, fans, and family members. Welcome on back to another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. I'm your host, David T. Pike. And as always, we're diving on in. So folks, I gotta tell you something right now. That game we just witnessed against the Washington Commanders, number one, that's exactly how that game should have been played. That's exactly how that game should have come out. That's exactly how the score should have been as far as our point scoring total. That is exactly what this Lions team should be doing on a damn near week in, week out basis. That's exactly what we should be seeing. That offensive performance, it was crisp, it was rhythmic, it was explosive, it was consistent. It was everything that offense should exactly be. Now, let me put this out there for you all. I know a lot of people are going to look at that game and they're going to say, that's it for John Morton. He's done as the offensive coordinator. Lions are going to most likely get rid of him at the end of the season, just like they did with Anthony Lynn. I'm going to tell you this right now. I don't know if that's going to happen or not. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know if it's going to happen or not. And there's a couple of reasons why I don't know if it's going to happen or not. Not saying that it will, not saying that it won't. But let's just understand the situation that we saw against the Washington Commanders in that game for what it is. Dan Campbell has a better understanding and is a better play caller for this offense than John Morton is. It's just that simple. It is just that damn simple. And honestly, it has not a damn thing to do with experience. It doesn't have a damn thing to do with, amount of years that you've been coaching, how many people you've been underneath as far as, offensive-minded individuals, whether it's, all these other great offensive coaches that John Morton's worked underneath. It doesn't matter. That's been proven evidently clear in just what happened in that one game alone against the Washington Commanders. And the reason why I'm saying that is because of the simple fact of the matter is that Dan Campbell has next to no experience calling plays versus what John Morton has had. John Morton was an offensive coordinator that called plays with the Jets previously. He's been an offensive coordinator in college who's called plays. This is a guy that has immensely more experience than what Dan Campbell has in terms of calling plays. But yet, the difference that we have seen in the one game that Dan Campbell had against the Washington Commanders versus what John Morton has had over the last couple of weeks is absolutely astoundingly different. That right there already tells me that there's going to be, that this change that we're seeing right now, this change that was enacted this week, it's not going to go anywhere. In fact, I'd be willing to bet you this, and I'm pretty sure most everybody would agree with me, this is going to be the dynamic that the Lions are likely going to have for the rest of the season, playoffs included. I would be willing to bet my bottom dollar on that. Because what we clearly saw is that Dan Campbell just has a better idea, a better understanding of how these players respond and how these players react and are able to get the job done based upon the play calling. Because everybody thinks that when you call plays, it's just, oh, well, you know what? you just need to call a good play and then the players are going to execute it. No, it takes more than that to understand play calling. You have to understand the rhythm and the flow of the game. You have to understand, as Jared Goff said in the post-game presser, you have to understand when to pour the gas on. You have to understand when to pull back. You have to go with the ebb and the flow of the game, and you have to understand that while calling plays. You have to understand how the defense is going to react to you. You have to understand what they're going to try to do to stop you. You have to figure out how to counter that. You have to understand that, okay, there is a very, for lack of a better word or phrase, it's an art form. It's not just purely saying, oh, well, you know what? We've ran this play in the past and it works all the time. We're going to run it here. Again, it's not like Madden. It's not like you can just, spam play a certain play that you've ran 100 times and you know exactly how to get the result you're looking for because you've just ran it so many times. You have to understand how, when, and where a certain play is going to work against whatever kind of defense you're playing against and based upon the circumstances within the game. It's an art form. Well, part of that art form is understanding the players. Part of that art form is realizing when is an appropriate time to call this play based upon what's going on in the game. And there's no two ways around it. Dan Campbell understands that better than John Morton does. And the reason why is because Dan Campbell just gets the players better. He understands the players. And that's no small secret to just, state that. I mean, for crying out loud, Dan Campbell's been the head coach for the last 5 years. He's built this team, in essence, his image. These players know him, they respect him, they love him as a coach, they love him as a human being. They respect and love him as a leader. There's no way that happens if you don't understand and have a full finger on the pulse of the team. Dan Campbell knows that. Dan Campbell has that understanding. And as such, as Dan Campbell himself said, it's like, listen, it's one thing to try and say what you want. It's one thing to try and speak it into existence. But it's another thing altogether when you're like, okay, obviously I've said what I want to have happen, but it's not clearly getting conveyed. Maybe not necessarily because of a lack of communication or understanding. It's just not getting done in the way that he wants it done. And again, that goes back to understanding, okay, you know what? This would be what I would call in this particular situation. This is how I would call this. This is how the personnel would look. This would be the situation, down and distance, whatever have you. Trying to fit that all together within a certain person's cranium and thought process, it's very hard to do. So I can understand exactly why Dan Campbell took over play calling duties. Now, let me just put this out there for you all. This is why, even though how Dan Campbell did this whole thing, I already know everyone's going to state that this is just like Anthony Lynn all over again. I'm going to tell you this right now. It's not. It's not Anthony Lynn all over again. Number one, even before John Morton had the play calling duties taken away from him, because let's just call it for what it is, he had play calling duties taken away from him. Campbell took those over. Even before that happened, this was still a top 5 scoring offense in the NFL. That was nowhere even close to where it was in 2021. That's number one difference. You can't say it's the same thing when John Morton, even though this offense was struggling and it was not fully clicking, it was still a top 5 scoring offense. Now, yeah, I know a lot of people are going to say, well, that's more on the players. Whatever way you want to call it, the point of the matter is the facts are in the pudding. When John Morton was in charge of play calling, this was still a top 5 scoring offense. The points and the stats prove that. Now, in terms of the efficiency, that's not the case. It's not the case at all. And I mean, anybody who watched that game knows that. But if you actually take an in-depth look at the statistical performance, it becomes abundantly clear that that was the case. As we all know, throughout the entire course of the season, what's the one thing that's been constantly talked about and hammered just over and over and over again as an area of improvement the Lions need to get better at? Third down conversion. There was one point in the game where the Lions had literally converted on third down 4 straight times. It was boom, 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 boom. They finished the game overall 5 out of 10 on third down. But let's understand that. Like, the last 2 drives of the game, the Lions literally had put in their backups. They didn't care. They already knew the game was over. So, again, even though that's a 50% conversion rate, chances are you could probably say it's probably closer to like 5 out of 7 or 5 out of 8, something like that. 4th down conversion, the Lions were still pretty damn good like they always are. They were 2 for 2, 100%. But the efficiency goes well beyond that. This is the difference factor in terms of where John Morton was as a play caller and just running the show by himself, in essence, as far as calling plays, versus how Dan Campbell did it. Think about this, folks. The Lions had 9 drives in that game. 9. You want to take a wild guess how many times the Lions punted the ball in that game? If you watch the game, you already know the answer to this. 0. The Lions did not punt the ball once over the entire course of the game. Think about that. And it wasn't because of the fact that, oh, you know what? They went into the halftime period and they didn't have to punt. No. The Lions had the ball for 9 straight drives. Not 9 straight drives. That'd be impressive. They had the ball for 9 drives, right? They scored 8 out of 9 drives. The only drive they didn't score was the last drive of the game where they kneeled down. That means that they scored on every single drive except the final drive for victory formation. I mean, it's 8 out of 9, but you might as well call that 100% success rate. 100% success rate. Even though it's actually 88.9%, that's 100% success rate. Every single drive, you're getting points, whether it's touchdowns or it's field goals. Which means it shows in the final score because the Lions scored 44 damn points. That's their second highest scoring output of the entire season. I mean, that right there just spells it out point blank proof. But again, like I said earlier with the whole case with John Morton as the play caller, what's still the number 1 scoring output? Week 2 against the Bears when John Morton in this offense put up 52 points. But again, it comes back to the efficiency. Because even in that game against the Bears, the Lions were not as efficient as they could have been. You go back to that game against the Bears, the Lions could have probably hung 60 points on the Bears, plus. But the fact that the Lions had 9 drives and they scored 8 out of 9 drives, which again, like I said, is pretty much 100%, that right there tells me all I need to know about the difference. The efficiency factor, the smoothness, the fluidity, the ability of efficiency is just absolutely different when Campbell calls the plays. And again, other ways to look at it. No sacks in this game were given up. Didn't matter if Kyle Allen was in. Didn't matter if it was Goff who played the majority of the game. No sacks given up. First time in a month that's happened. First time in a month. No tackles for loss either on the offense. They didn't have a single play that went backwards. That's impressive. Then think about this. You go back to that game against the Lions. Not against the Lions. We are the Lions. That game against the Vikings. How many damn penalties did we have offensively? You know, illegal formation, illegal procedure, false start, holding, whatever. You want to know how many penalties the Lions had in this game against the Commanders? 3. 3 penalties for 1 yard. That's what I call not only efficient, smooth, fluid, that's also clean. Granted, that's on both sides of the ball. But for a game that we just had against the Vikings where we were getting called for everything and then you go into this game and you don't get called for virtually anything, that shows that, again, the players responded offensively to Campbell being the one in charge of calling plays. And then think about this, folks. This gets even better. You want to know how many pass plays the Lions had that were 15 yards or more? Not necessarily 15 air yards or more. I'm just talking about 15 yards gained on the ground. It could have been a screen that went for 15 yards, but we know that didn't happen all that often. The Lions had literally 8 of those plays. They had 6 run plays that went for 10 yards or more. And then, here's where it gets even better. The Lions, out of total plays that they had that were for 10 yards or more, pass and run, they had 20 of them. They had 20 plays that went for 10 yards or more against the Commanders. They called 68. That means that 29.4% of all plays they called in that game against the Commanders went for 10 plus yards or more. That is crazy. That means that when you have that kind of production, you are going to be very good at moving the ball and scoring, which, again, is exactly what happened. Then, it gets even more crazy when you start looking at the overall efficiency in another way. Think about this. In the Lions' first 5 offensive drives against the Commanders in this game, first 5 drives, each one of those drives had 3 plays or more in it where they had 10 yards or more gained. So think about that. First 5 drives, each one of those drives had 3 plays or more that had 10 yards a pop. And then in the 5th drive, so the first drive coming out of the first half break, so out of halftime, the 5th drive, the Lions had 5 plays in that drive. Every single play in that drive gained 11 yards or more. Every single play. It was first down, first down, first down, first down, first down, touchdown. Every single play. In fact, the average yards gained per play during that drive was 14.4 yards. It was absolutely beautiful. Literally every play was either a first down or a touchdown. That is literally just 5 yards. That's just literally 5 plays of perfect execution coming right out of the half. I don't even think during Ben Johnson's tenure here did that ever happen. Come straight out of the halftime and literally every freaking play you call right out of the half for your first offensive drive series is a first down and then it winds up in a touchdown. Like, dude, that's just not something you typically see. Even with the best offenses, they aren't that efficient. But you literally have 5 plays on your 5th drive coming out of the halftime period, so you've had a 15-20 minute cooldown period. You haven't gotten a chance to get loose and limber again yet. But you come right out of the halftime period and it's just boom, 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 touchdown. That's more than just, the offensive players that the Lions have. That's good coaching, understanding, hey, this is the right time to call the play. This is the right moment to call it. This is how we're going to do it. And it's putting the plays into action for the players to be put in a position to make it happen by putting them in a position to succeed. And then you have to think about this. You want to know what Goff's average per throw was? 9.7 yards. That's in essence a first down a throw. A first down a throw. And then, you want to know what Sonic and Knuckles yards per rush was in this game? 7.1. That means that between those 3 guys alone, any time that they touched the ball, the Lions were getting first downs. How do you stop an offense like that? The phrase is you can't. You can't stop an offense that literally is picking up a first down damn near any time 3 players are touching the football. You can't do it. But you have to understand something here. I know all that evidence I just pointed out, pretty much to everyone's going to say, oh yeah, writing's on the wall. John Morton is done. John Morton might be done as the play caller. That part I'll probably go along with. That might change going into the offseason, going into next year. I don't know. That is if he retains his job. But here's what I will say. I don't think that John Morton's time is done here in Detroit for one simple reason. Go back to what Dan Campbell said at the end of that press conference. He said, John Morton plays a vital, critical role in everything else that we do. It's not like just when Anthony Lynn was around, he was just kind of hanging around doing whatever. That's not the same case here. Dan Campbell literally said that the passing game is still John Morton's baby. He controls all that. So that's not going away anytime soon. And on top of that, Dan Campbell said that it's still a collaborative effort where all the coaches are involved. John Morton is obviously giving a lot of influence. He's giving a lot of advice and a lot of, input as to what plays to call. I'm sure David Shaw is doing the same thing. I'm sure Hank Fraley's doing the same. They're all talking once amongst another, and they're saying, hey, based upon this is what we would recommend. And then once Campbell has all that data, he's going to be like, okay, this is what I'm going to go with. I don't see Dan Campbell wanting to get rid of John Morton because John Morton does have the ability to be a great game planner and have the ability to draw up plays that the way the Lions want them drawn up. I don't think the problem there is quote-unquote the schematics of the offense because Goff never said it was a problem with the schematics. Campbell has never said it's a problem with the schematics. The problem has been the play calling. Which again, like I said, that's an art form. You have to understand and know when's the right time to call a play based upon the players and based upon the flow of the game. That to me tells me one simple thing. Dan Campbell is the best play caller that the Lions have moving forward. But if you're talking about a great schemer, you're talking about a guy that can pass along game plans and can put your guys into these really good schemes and really good game plans, that's still John Morton. Which tells me that John Morton and Dan Campbell are going to work in a collaborative effort to get the offense the way they want it to be. John Morton's going to put together the game plans. He's going to put together the passing game plans, the passing schemes, and everything else to get that part of the offense going, whereas Hank Fraley's going to do the same thing with the running game. And then once those two are put together, it's then going to go to Dan Campbell to call the plays. Which, let's call it for what it is. A lot of other teams do that in the NFL, so it's not like this is a new revelation. It's just a new revelation to the Lions because for the last couple of years, we always had the offensive coordinator that was the one doing that. And he would take advice from the run game coordinator, the pass game coordinator, and he put it into himself. Now we're just adding another person into the mix. That's really the only thing that's different here. So, here's what I honestly think. Is the writing on the wall for John Morton? No, I don't think it is. Not at least as a coach here for the Detroit Lions. I think he's going to retain his offensive coordinator role at the end of the season. But whether or not he gets his play calling duties back after the end of the season, that remains to be a mystery. Because if Dan Campbell really gets to a point where it's like, listen, I'm the best person to call the plays the way I want them so that way I can get the offense I'm looking for, that might remain the same. But as far as the game planning and the scheming, that's still going to all fall into John Morton's ball court, and then it's going to go to Dan Campbell to call the plays the way he wants it done. Because that's how he wants it. And it's a lot easier for him to call the plays and to get it the way he wants to look rather than having John Morton do it because obviously, as we've already seen, that is a very hit or miss kind of thing. So better to just leave it in Campbell's hand, let him roll with it, rather than trying to have John Morton do with it. Because in my opinion, John Morton is still going to give you the best game planning and the best scheming that the Lions are most likely going to get. And some people are not going to like me saying that. But do you honestly think that it was Dan Campbell that came up with the scheming and the game planning? No. That still fell on John Morton because Goff himself said nothing else changed about how they did everything this week, which meant that John Morton was still instrumental in putting up the game planning, putting the schematics together for that game plan. That tells me that pretty much, again, collaborative effort. It just means that John Morton's not calling the plays anymore, which still means he's still the offensive coordinator. He's coordinating it. He's just not calling the plays anymore. That's now Dan Campbell's responsibility, which, as we've now seen twice, Dan Campbell's a pretty damn good play caller because he understands how this team operates. So it's like, you know what? I'm totally fine if Dan Campbell retains play calling duties for the rest of his time here in Detroit until maybe you find somebody else or you gain trust again in John Morton. If you feel that way, Dan Campbell. But it's like right now, yeah, you the play caller. And I'm totally fine with that. So, that's my thought process with this whole situation. Whether or not you agree with me, we'll find out when the comments come in. But, having said that, I'm going to end this episode and say thank you all for watching in another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. If you like what you saw, by all means, I highly encourage y'all to watch the next episode. Also encourage y'all to do this. If you enjoyed the content, please by all means subscribe because, again, it always helps the channel out. But, also, if you subscribed in the past and you forgot to do so at the time, or you just subscribed and you not yet had a chance to do so, want to highly encourage y'all also, make sure you hit that bell notification icon so you guys never miss any more content I push out. Hope y'all are doing well. Hope y'all got something in your life that makes you happy, makes you smile. God bless, my friends. And until the next time we meet, I'll see you all in the next episode.